no way this is your car. Step away from the vehicle, now.
Officer, this is my vehicle. I have the registration and my medical license.
Don't play games with me. Someone like you doesn't drive a car like this. This thing is stolen.
I'm telling you, it's mine. You're welcome to look at the paperwork.
A successful emergency room doctor pulled into a gas station after saving lives during his shift on July 2nd, 2020. He drove the white Lamborghini he had worked 20 years to afford. A young police officer saw the expensive car and made a terrible assumption. What happened next would destroy both their lives forever and cost the city millions of dollars. The Shell gas station sat on the corner of Elm Street and Maple Avenue in one of Minneapolis's most expensive neighborhoods. Bright fluorescent lights illuminated the clean concrete and freshly painted fuel pumps. This was not the kind of place where trouble usually happened. Wealthy families filled their luxury cars here on their way home from dinner parties and country club events. The area was known for million-dollar homes and perfectly manicured lawns. On July 2nd, 2020, the nation was still reeling from the death of George Floyd just weeks earlier. Protests filled the streets of Minneapolis every day. Police officers worked longer shifts and faced angry crowds demanding justice. The entire city felt tense and divided. Everyone seemed to be watching and waiting for the next incident. Dr. Marcus Williams had just finished the most exhausting shift of his career. For 16 straight hours, he had worked in the emergency room at Hennepin County Medical Center. The hospital was overflowing with COVID-19 patients. Doctors and nurses pushed themselves to the breaking point trying to save lives. Marcus had intubated 3 patients, performed emergency surgery on a car accident victim, and comforted families who lost loved ones to the virus. Marcus grew up in Detroit, where his father worked on the assembly line at Ford Motor Company. His mother cleaned office buildings at night to help pay the bills. They lived in a small apartment where gunshots sometimes echoed through the streets. Marcus studied by candlelight when the electricity got turned off. His parents told him education was the only way to escape poverty. He became the first person in his family to attend college. At the University of Michigan, Marcus worked 3 jobs while studying pre-med. He delivered pizzas, tutored other students, and cleaned laboratories. His grades never dropped below an A-. Medical school brought even more challenges. Marcus borrowed over $300,000 to pay for his education. He ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights and wore the same 3 shirts to class. During his residency, Marcus worked 100-hour weeks for almost no money. He slept in hospital break rooms and forgot what his apartment looked like. Other residents complained about the long hours, but Marcus felt grateful for the opportunity. His hands learned to save lives while his mind absorbed every lesson his mentors taught him. After years of sacrifice, Marcus finally achieved his dream. He became an emergency room physician and started earning enough money to pay off his loans. His colleagues respected him for his calm demeanor during medical emergencies. Patients trusted him because he listened carefully and explained treatments in simple terms. The hospital relied on Marcus to handle their most difficult cases. 6 months earlier, Marcus had walked into the Lamborghini dealership and paid cash for a white Huracan. The car represented everything he had worked for since childhood. His parents cried when they saw it parked in their driveway during his visit home. The gleaming white paint and powerful engine proved that hard work and education could overcome any obstacle. Marcus loved the way the car made him feel successful and proud of his achievements. Officer Jake Mitchell had dreamed of becoming a police officer since he was 8 years old. He grew up in Wilmar, Minnesota, a small farming town where everybody knew each other's names. The population was 19,000 people, and less than 2% were black. Jake's father owned a hardware store, and his mother taught elementary school. They lived in a white house with a picket fence where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. In high school, Jake played football and baseball while maintaining a B average in his classes. His teachers described him as polite and hardworking. Jake volunteered at the local animal shelter and helped elderly neighbors with yard work. He dated the same girl for 3 years and planned to marry her after college. Everyone in town expected Jake to take over his father's hardware store someday. Jake surprised his family when he announced his intention to study criminal justice at Minnesota State University. He wanted to make a difference in the world and help people who could not help themselves. His professors praised his dedication to learning about law enforcement procedures. Jake graduated with honors and immediately applied to the Minneapolis Police Academy. The police academy challenged Jake in ways he had never experienced. Physical training pushed his body to its limits, while classroom instruction filled his mind with complex legal concepts. Jake learned about constitutional rights, proper arrest procedures, and community policing strategies. His instructors emphasized the importance of treating all citizens with respect and dignity. Jake received high marks in every subject and graduated near the top of his class. During academy training, Jake attended several sessions about implicit bias and cultural sensitivity. The instructors explained how unconscious prejudices could influence police decisions. They showed videos of officers making mistakes during encounters with minority citizens. Jake listened carefully and believed he understood the lessons. He promised himself he would never let race influence his judgment as a police officer. The Minneapolis Police Department hired Jake in May 2020, just weeks after George Floyd's death had sparked nationwide protests. The department was under intense scrutiny from the media, politicians, and community activists. New officers like Jake received extra training about de-escalation and proper use of force. Supervisors warned them that every action would be watched and judged by the public. Jake's field training officer was a 20-year veteran named Sergeant Rodriguez, who had seen the department through many difficult periods. She taught Jake to stay calm under pressure and always follow proper procedures. Rodriguez emphasized that good police work required patience, observation, and careful thinking. She warned Jake that rookie officers often made career-ending mistakes by acting too quickly or aggressively. During his first 6 weeks on the force, Jake handled mostly routine calls. He wrote traffic tickets, responded to noise complaints, and took reports for minor thefts. His supervisors noted that Jake seemed eager to prove himself as an effective officer. Sometimes this eagerness made him tense during encounters with citizens. Other officers advised Jake to relax and trust his training. Jake had recently married his college girlfriend, Sarah, and they were struggling financially on his starting salary. They lived with Sarah's parents while saving money for their own apartment. The stress of a new marriage, new career, and financial pressure weighed heavily on Jake's mind. He felt desperate to succeed and feared making any mistakes that could cost him his job. The department had recently issued warnings about luxury car thefts in surrounding suburbs. Thieves were targeting expensive vehicles parked in affluent neighborhoods. Officers were instructed to be especially vigilant about suspicious activity involving high-end cars. Jake took these briefings seriously and wanted to be the officer who caught the criminals. On the night of July 2nd, Jake was patrolling alone through Maple Grove's wealthiest neighborhoods. He had been working the overnight shift for 2 weeks and was still adjusting to staying awake during late hours. The quiet suburban streets made him feel nervous because he was used to the constant activity of his small hometown. Every shadow seemed potentially threatening, and every expensive car made him wonder if it might be stolen. Officer Jake Mitchell was driving slowly through the quiet streets of Maple Grove when he spotted the white Lamborghini turning into the Shell gas station. The expensive car immediately caught his attention because it seemed out of place at nearly midnight. Jake had been thinking about the recent briefings on luxury car thefts, and his pulse quickened as he watched the vehicle pull up to pump number 3. The security camera mounted on the corner of the gas station building captured everything that happened next. The wide-angle lens showed Dr. Marcus Williams stepping out of his car wearing navy blue medical scrubs under a black jacket. He moved with the confident stride of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Marcus walked around to the fuel pump and began the familiar routine of filling his tank. Jake parked his patrol car near the entrance of the gas station and stepped out with his hand resting on his service weapon. He had convinced himself that no black man could legitimately afford such an expensive vehicle in this neighborhood. His academy training about implicit bias had been forgotten in the excitement of what he believed was a real criminal investigation. Marcus was focused on fueling his car when he heard the aggressive voice behind him demanding that he step away from the vehicle. He turned around to see a young police officer approaching with an hostile expression. Marcus felt confused because he had done nothing wrong, but he remained calm, as his medical training had taught him to do during emergencies. The officer shouted that there was no way the car belonged to Marcus and ordered him to move away immediately. Marcus set down the fuel nozzle and reached into his pocket to retrieve his wallet. He had dealt with difficult situations before and believed that showing his identification would quickly resolve the misunderstanding. Marcus extended his driver's license, vehicle registration, and medical license toward the officer while speaking in a calm, professional voice. He explained that the Lamborghini was his car and offered to provide any documentation the officer needed. The security camera clearly showed Marcus's cooperative behavior and non-threatening posture throughout the encounter. Officer Mitchell refused to look at the offered documents and became increasingly agitated. He pointed accusingly at the expensive vehicle and declared that someone like Marcus could not possibly afford such a car. The racist assumption was now explicit, but Mitchell seemed oblivious to how his words sounded to the growing number of witnesses. Several customers at nearby gas pumps had noticed the commotion and pulled out their cell phones to record the encounter. The multiple camera angles would later provide comprehensive documentation of everything that happened. Marcus maintained his composure despite the obvious racial profiling, continuing to offer his credentials to an officer who refused to examine them. The situation escalated when Mitchell stepped closer to Marcus and invaded his personal space. The officer demanded that Marcus put his hands where he could see them, even though Marcus had been fully compliant throughout the encounter. The doctor tried to explain his position at the hospital and showed his medical identification badge that hung clearly around his neck. Officer Mitchell dismissed the hospital badge as fake and refused to listen to any explanation. When Marcus requested permission to call his supervisor at the medical center for verification, Mitchell interpreted this reasonable request as suspicious behavior. The rookie officer's lack of experience and implicit bias had created a dangerous situation that was spiraling out of control. A second patrol car arrived with Officer Sarah Chen, who immediately recognized that her partner was escalating inappropriately. However, Chen failed to intervene effectively and allowed Mitchell to continue his aggressive approach. The backup officer's presence gave Mitchell more confidence to proceed with what he believed was a legitimate arrest. Marcus remained professional and asked to contact the hospital when Mitchell grabbed his arm as he reached for his cell phone. The officer spun the doctor around and forced him against the car, despite the complete absence of any resistance. The security footage clearly showed that Marcus never made any threatening gestures or movements during the entire encounter. Mitchell applied handcuffs with unnecessary force, causing Marcus's shoulder to dislocate as he was pressed against the concrete. The doctor cried out in pain from the injury, but the officer ignored his medical complaints. Bystanders began shouting at the officers and calling 911 to report what they were witnessing as police brutality. The gas station clerk came outside to see what was happening and immediately recognized Dr. Williams from his frequent visits to fuel his car. Several witnesses began trying to vouch for Marcus's identity, but the officers dismissed their statements. The crowd grew larger as more people stopped to watch and record the shocking scene. Despite clear evidence of vehicle ownership, medical credentials, and witness statements, Mitchell proceeded to arrest Marcus for obstruction of justice and suspicious behavior. The officer had never run the license plates or conducted any proper verification before initiating the confrontation. His supervisor would later note that basic police procedures had been completely ignored. Sergeant Patricia Rodriguez arrived on the scene and immediately recognized that proper procedures had not been followed. She ordered the other officers to finally run identification checks, which quickly confirmed Marcus's ownership of the vehicle and his professional status as a physician. The damage, however, had already been done. Paramedics were called to treat Marcus's shoulder injury, and they transported him to the same hospital where he worked as a patient rather than a physician. The humiliation was complete, but the security footage and cell phone recordings had preserved every moment of the racial profiling incident for the world to see. The ambulance carrying Dr. Marcus Williams pulled into the emergency bay at Hennepin County Medical Center just after midnight. The paramedics wheeled him through the same doors where he had saved countless lives during his career. Nurses and doctors who had worked alongside Marcus for years stared in shock as their colleague arrived as a patient with injuries caused by police brutality. Dr. Sarah Chen, the attending physician on duty, immediately recognized Marcus and demanded to know what had happened. When she learned that police officers had dislocated his shoulder during an arrest at a gas station, her face filled with anger and disbelief. The medical staff quickly gathered around their injured colleague, providing the best possible care while struggling to understand how such an incident could occur. Meanwhile, the cell phone videos from the gas station were already spreading across social media platforms. The first video appeared on Twitter at 12:34 a.m. with the caption asking viewers to share the shocking footage. Within 6 hours, the hashtag Justice for Dr. Williams was trending nationally, and the videos had been viewed over 2 million times. The footage showed everything exactly as it had happened. Viewers could see Marcus's calm demeanor, his attempts to provide identification, and Officer Mitchell's aggressive refusal to examine any evidence. The racist assumptions were clear for everyone to hear, and the excessive force was undeniable. Social media users expressed outrage and demanded immediate accountability from the Minneapolis Police Department. The Minneapolis Police Department's initial response made the situation worse instead of better. Their first statement defended the officers' actions and claimed that proper procedures had been followed during the investigation of suspicious activity. The department refused to release body camera footage and said only that an internal investigation was underway. Community members were not satisfied with the department's response. By dawn, protesters had gathered at the Shell gas station where the incident occurred. They carried signs demanding Officer Mitchell's immediate termination and calling for comprehensive police reform. The demonstration grew throughout the day as news outlets picked up the story and broadcast it nationally. The Minnesota Medical Association issued a strong statement condemning the treatment of Dr. Williams and calling for immediate police accountability. Medical professionals across the state expressed solidarity with their colleague and demanded better training for officers who clearly did not understand how to interact professionally with minority citizens. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey faced intense pressure to respond decisively to the incident. Community leaders, civil rights organizations, and medical professionals all demanded immediate action. The mayor promised a comprehensive review of the case and committed to implementing additional police reforms, but many felt his response was too little and too late. The Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis initially defended Officer Mitchell's actions, claiming he had followed proper procedures for investigating suspicious activity. Union representatives argued that officers must be allowed to investigate potential crimes without fear of political interference. This response further angered community members who saw clear evidence of racial profiling in the video footage. Dr. Williams's family struggled to process what had happened to their loved one. His wife spoke to reporters about the devastating impact the incident had on their children, who could not understand why police officers had hurt their father. The family was considering leaving Minnesota entirely because they no longer felt safe in their own community. The hospital placed Dr. Williams on medical leave due to his shoulder injury, which would require surgery and months of physical therapy. His medical colleagues volunteered to cover his shifts and organized fundraising efforts to help with legal expenses. The injury meant that Marcus might never be able to perform surgery again, potentially ending his career as an emergency physician. The FBI Civil Rights Division announced they would investigate potential federal civil rights violations in the case. Federal investigators began reviewing all evidence, including security footage, body camera video, and witness statements. The announcement signaled that the incident would face serious legal scrutiny beyond the local level. Within 48 hours of the incident, the Minneapolis Police Department was forced to place Officer Mitchell on paid administrative leave pending a full investigation. His partner, Officer Chen, received counseling and additional training but remained on active duty. The department also announced plans for enhanced bias training for all officers. Community leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss the incident and broader issues of police accountability. Religious leaders, civil rights activists, and concerned citizens gathered to demand systemic changes that would prevent similar incidents in the future. The conversations revealed deep frustration with ongoing patterns of racial profiling and police misconduct. The gas station where the incident occurred became a symbol of the ongoing struggle for racial justice. Community members left flowers and signs at pump number 3 where Dr. Williams had been arrested. The owner of the station expressed support for Dr. Williams and criticized the officer's conduct on his property. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office filed criminal charges against Officer Jake Mitchell 3 weeks after the gas station incident. The charges included assault under color of authority, civil rights violations, and official misconduct. Prosecutors had reviewed the security footage, witness statements, and body camera video before deciding that Mitchell's actions clearly violated both state and federal laws. The United States Attorney's Office announced federal civil rights charges against Mitchell 2 days after the state charges were filed. Federal prosecutors argued that Mitchell had willfully violated Dr. Williams's constitutional rights based on his race. The federal charges carried a potential sentence of up to 10 years in prison, making this a very serious case that could destroy Mitchell's life completely. Dr. Williams retained civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump to represent him in a lawsuit against Officer Mitchell, the Minneapolis Police Department, and the City of Minneapolis. The lawsuit sought $8.2 million in damages for the physical injuries, emotional trauma, and damage to Dr. Williams's medical career. Crump argued that the incident represented a clear pattern of racial profiling that the city had failed to address. Mitchell's defense attorney attempted to negotiate a plea bargain that would reduce the charges and prison sentence. However, Federal prosecutors refused to consider any deals because the evidence of racial bias and excessive force was overwhelming. The security footage and witness testimony made it impossible to argue that Mitchell had acted appropriately during the encounter. The federal trial lasted 3 weeks and featured devastating evidence against Officer Mitchell. Prosecutors played the security footage repeatedly, showing the jury exactly how Mitchell had refused to examine Dr. Williams's identification and made explicitly racist assumptions. Expert witnesses testified about proper police procedures and explained how Mitchell had violated every standard of professional conduct. The defense attorney argued that Mitchell was an inexperienced rookie officer who had made an honest mistake under stressful circumstances. However, the jury was not persuaded by this argument because the evidence clearly showed deliberate racial profiling rather than a simple error in judgment. The racist statements captured on video made it impossible to claim that race had not motivated Mitchell's actions. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Officer Mitchell on all federal charges. The verdict sent a clear message that police officers could not hide behind their badges when they violated citizens' constitutional rights. Civil rights advocates celebrated the conviction as an important step toward police accountability, though they acknowledged that much more work remained to be done. Federal Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Mitchell to 18 months in federal prison, 2 years of supervised release, and 200 hours of community service in minority communities. During the sentencing hearing, the judge noted that Mitchell's actions had damaged public trust in law enforcement and caused serious harm to an innocent citizen who had dedicated his life to helping others. The Minneapolis Police Department terminated Mitchell immediately after his conviction and forfeited his pension benefits. Officer Chen received a written reprimand and mandatory bias training, but kept her job. The department also implemented new policies requiring supervisor approval for vehicle stops in affluent areas and enhanced training programs about implicit bias. The city of Minneapolis settled Dr. Williams's civil lawsuit for $2 million to avoid a costly trial that would have generated more negative publicity. While the city admitted no wrongdoing in the settlement agreement, officials agreed to implement additional policy changes designed to prevent similar incidents in the future. The settlement money could not repair the damage to Dr. Williams's life and career. His shoulder injury required multiple surgeries and prevented him from returning to emergency medicine. The physical trauma was accompanied by severe post-traumatic stress disorder that made it difficult for him to trust police officers or feel safe in public spaces. The stress of the incident and its aftermath destroyed Dr. Williams's marriage. His wife struggled to cope with the constant media attention and death threats from people who supported Officer Mitchell. The couple divorced 6 months after the incident, and Dr. Williams moved to a different city to start over with his life and career. Mitchell served 14 months in federal prison before being released early for good behavior. His wife had divorced him during the trial, and he struggled to find employment with a federal conviction on his record. Mitchell eventually found work as a security guard at a shopping mall, earning minimum wage and living in a small apartment far from his hometown. The incident sparked additional lawsuits from witnesses who claimed they had been harassed by police officers for recording the encounter. The city faced multiple discrimination claims from community members who had experienced similar treatment from the Minneapolis Police Department. Legal experts estimated that the total cost to the city would exceed $5 million. The Minnesota legislature passed comprehensive police accountability measures in response to the incident and other cases of misconduct. The new laws required mandatory bias training for all officers, independent oversight of police departments, and stronger penalties for officers who violated citizens' rights. Reform advocates praised the legislation but argued that more changes were needed. The case became a landmark example of how implicit bias could destroy lives and careers. Police academies across the country began using the security footage as a training tool to show officers the consequences of racial profiling. Medical schools incorporated discussions about discrimination into their curricula to prepare future doctors for similar challenges. Both men's lives had been permanently altered by the events at the gas station. Dr. Williams became a public speaker on racial justice issues, sharing his story to educate others about the ongoing impact of police misconduct. Mitchell expressed remorse for his actions but continued to struggle with guilt and depression years after the incident. The incident contributed to broader police reform movements across the United States. Community activists pointed to the case as evidence that individual training was not enough to address systemic racism in law enforcement. They argued for fundamental changes in police culture, hiring practices, and accountability systems. The total financial impact on Minneapolis exceeded $5 million when including the settlement, legal fees, training programs, and administrative changes. Federal oversight required the police department to report regularly on bias incidents and implement community oversight boards. The case became a cautionary tale about the enormous costs of failing to address racial bias in policing.